Mara had always believed that the quiet moments in a relationship were the safest ones because silence often felt more comforting than arguments, yet she never realized that silence could also hide the distance growing between two people until it became impossible to ignore. On a cool autumn evening in the peaceful lakeside town of Ashbrook, she welcomed her longtime friend Evelyn into her home, hoping that a relaxed conversation would help release the pressure that had been building inside her for months. The house felt unusually calm as soft rain tapped gently against the windows and warm light from the fireplace painted golden reflections across the room, creating the illusion that everything in their lives remained perfectly stable. Mara prepared tea instead of wine, believing a simple evening with a trusted friend would clear her thoughts without realizing that the conversation ahead would quietly reshape the course of several lives. Evelyn noticed the dark circles beneath Mara's eyes and asked whether work had become more demanding, but the answer carried far more emotion than either of them expected because exhaustion had reached much deeper than the office walls. Mara admitted that every day felt like she was carrying invisible stones on her shoulders, struggling to balance responsibilities, expectations, and the growing emptiness she could no longer explain. Her husband Adrian had spent the past year working tirelessly to expand his small architectural business, leaving before sunrise and returning home long after darkness settled across the neighborhood with the hope of building a secure future for them both. Although his intentions came from love, the endless hours apart slowly replaced laughter with routine until their home began to feel more like a shared shelter than a place where two hearts truly met. Evelyn listened patiently without interrupting because she understood that sometimes people needed understanding more than advice, allowing every painful thought to rise naturally before offering comfort. Mara confessed that she missed the man who used to surprise her with spontaneous weekend trips and handwritten notes, wondering when those beautiful moments had quietly disappeared beneath schedules, unpaid bills, and constant responsibilities. As the conversation became more emotional, Mara lowered her voice and stared into the glowing fireplace while tears gathered in her eyes, admitting that there were days when she questioned whether marrying so young had been the right decision. The words escaped during a moment of overwhelming frustration rather than certainty, yet once they were spoken they lingered heavily in the room like smoke that refused to disappear. Neither woman realized that Adrian had returned home earlier than expected after a client canceled an evening meeting, quietly stepping inside through the back entrance to avoid interrupting what sounded like a private conversation. Standing unseen in the hallway, he heard enough to understand only the painful confession, while missing every explanation that followed, leaving his heart filled with conclusions that were far harsher than reality. Evelyn immediately reminded Mara that temporary disappointment should never be mistaken for permanent truth, encouraging her to speak honestly with Adrian before silence created wounds that neither of them could repair. Mara nodded slowly and admitted that despite everything she still loved her husband deeply, promising herself that she would apologize and explain her feelings before another day passed. Adrian remained frozen where he stood because the words echoing through his mind drowned out every hopeful sentence spoken afterward, convincing him that he had become the greatest mistake in the life of the woman he loved most. Instead of walking into the living room and asking for the truth, he quietly turned around, left the house, and drove through the rain for hours while wrestling with heartbreak that seemed impossible to calm. The following morning Mara woke unusually early with a strange feeling she could not explain, noticing that the other side of the bed had never been slept in and that Adrian's favorite coffee mug remained untouched beside the kitchen sink. She tried calling his phone several times during breakfast, but every attempt ended with silence that slowly transformed ordinary concern into overwhelming fear. Hours passed without a single message until she finally discovered a neatly folded envelope resting beneath the framed photograph from their honeymoon, placed where she could never overlook it even in the middle of panic. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the letter, sensing before reading the first sentence that nothing inside would leave her life unchanged. The message explained that Adrian had spent months believing hard work would strengthen their marriage, only to realize that success meant very little if the person he loved secretly wished life had taken another direction. He wrote that he needed time to rebuild the confidence he had lost during one heartbreaking evening and asked her not to search for him until he could remember who he had been before doubt consumed his spirit. Mara remained motionless long after finishing the letter because every sentence forced her to confront how easily careless words spoken during a single emotional conversation could destroy years of devotion built through patience, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty. She had planned to heal a struggling marriage with honesty, yet before sunrise, The opportunity to speak face to face had already slipped beyond her reach, leaving only unanswered questions and the painful hope that it was not too late to repair what had been broken. Mara refused to accept that one heartbreaking misunderstanding would become the final chapter of their marriage, so she gathered every memory, every photograph, and every message they had ever shared while searching for any clue that might reveal where Adrian had gone. Each passing day reminded her that love could disappear quietly when pride and silence stood between two people who still cared deeply for one another. She contacted his closest friends and former co-workers, yet no one could offer more than kind sympathy because Adrian had carefully stepped away from every familiar place that once connected him to his old life. It seemed as though he had chosen to begin again somewhere beyond the reach of painful memories, determined to rebuild his future without looking back. Weeks gradually became months, and the empty house that once echoed with shared laughter now felt painfully large as every room carried reminders of dreams they had planned together. Mara often found herself preparing 2 cups of coffee before realizing she was alone, placing the untouched cup back into the cabinet with tears filling her eyes. Instead of allowing regret to consume her completely, she began attending community counseling sessions where people shared stories of broken relationships, forgiveness, and personal growth that slowly changed the way she viewed her own mistakes. Listening to others taught her that lasting love required honest conversations during difficult moments instead of silent suffering that eventually exploded into painful words. Adrian had settled in a quiet mountain village several hundred miles away where nobody knew his history, allowing him to focus entirely on rebuilding both his career and his confidence without constant reminders of the life he had left behind. Designing homes for young families reminded him that strong foundations mattered not only in buildings but also in relationships, a lesson he carried with him every single day. Although he appeared calm on the outside, lonely evenings often pulled him back toward memories of the woman he had once imagined growing old beside, leaving him wondering whether he had walked away too quickly. Even so, he believed that returning before healing himself would only reopen wounds that neither of them understood at the time. Nearly 1 year later, fate quietly placed them in the same city during a charity event supporting families who had lost their homes after a severe storm, bringing together hundreds of volunteers from different communities. Neither expected to see the other, and when their eyes finally met across the crowded hall, time itself seemed to pause. Mara slowly walked toward Adrian with tears already streaming down her face because she knew no carefully prepared speech could fully express the remorse she had carried every day since he left. She admitted that frustration had spoken louder than love during that terrible evening, and confessed that losing him had forced her to understand the true value of everything they once shared. Adrian listened without interrupting because he had imagined this conversation countless times, yet hearing her heartfelt apology in person carried a sincerity that no letter could ever capture. He admitted that leaving without allowing a real conversation had also been a painful mistake, acknowledging that fear had guided his decision more than wisdom. They spent hours talking beneath the evening sky, sharing every hidden fear, disappointment, hope, and misunderstanding that had remained buried for far too long until silence no longer existed between them. For the first time in many months they truly listened instead of assuming what the other person felt, discovering that honesty created bridges where pride had once built walls. Neither believed that forgiveness could instantly erase the pain they had experienced, yet both understood that healing always begins with a single decision, to move forward rather than remain imprisoned by yesterday. They agreed to rebuild trust patiently through consistent actions instead of empty promises, giving their relationship a stronger foundation than it had ever possessed before. The journey ahead demanded courage, patience, and unwavering commitment, but both Mara and Adrian recognized that genuine love was never about living without mistakes, because every relationship faces moments of weakness. Real love survives when two people choose understanding over assumptions, communication over silence, and compassion over pride, even during the most difficult seasons of life. Years later, their home once again became filled with warmth, laughter, and peaceful evenings where difficult conversations were welcomed instead of avoided, because they had learned that honesty protected love far better than pretending everything was perfect. Friends often admired the strength of their marriage without realizing it had been rebuilt from the ashes of heartbreak through humility, forgiveness, and the willingness to grow together. Looking back, Mara understood that the greatest lesson of her life was not about avoiding mistakes but about speaking with kindness before temporary frustration turned into lasting regret. While Adrian realized that walking away without seeking the full truth could also leave deep scars, Their remarkable journey became a reminder that even the strongest relationships require care, patience, and open hearts if they are to endure the challenges that every life eventually brings. Please subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends and family. We create entertaining and inspiring stories for our viewers, and your support helps us continue making great content for you.